Hi guys, Emma here, and today I'm going to be telling some creepy stories because it is October, my favourite time of year, and nearly Halloween. And I have done a couple of creepy story videos before. You may have noticed that I do have an active imagination and I am a little bit kooky, so take the stories as you will, but they are 100% true to me and they all happen to me, so I hope you enjoy these stories. My first story is called The Ancient Cowbell. When I was a kid, I was really interested in archaeology and I wanted to be an archaeologist when I grew up. That was until a teacher told me, "You can't be an archaeologist because everything's already been discovered." Kids, don't listen to everything your teacher says. So I didn't pursue archaeology as a career, but it sort of fell to me as a hobby later on in life. And I really enjoy scouring old riverbanks, old dumps, old home sites, and looking at maps to see where ancient buildings once stood. One of the places I really like to explore is my local woods, and I found lots of things there from the olden times. I know that there were two old houses, manor houses, that used to be in existence there and which were knocked down sometime in the 1950s or 60s. The placement of the houses was so remote that anything that I find in that area I assume just comes from the residents there, and it's made me very curious about their lives. For instance, I'm pretty sure that this used to be their old bottle and that this used to be one of their old pipes. Finding such items really makes me think about what kind of people used them, and what kind of lives these people led, and it makes me feel closer to history. Last year, when I was looking at one of the old maps of my local area, I discovered that there was a boathouse listed on the riverbank just between the two old manor houses. I was very curious about what this boathouse must have looked like and why it was there. The boathouse was listed in an area that was now very difficult to get to, but since the time it was listed on the map, there had been a series of new planting in the area, which made this particular area very difficult to get to because the new planting was very thick. I had never actually been to this area of the river before, so I didn't know what it looked like or if there was any trace of the boathouse left. However, I was really curious to see if there was anything left, and I really wanted to find out what was down there. It's a place that I called, and which I still call, the secret corner, because it was always secret to me. I could never get down there. But one day last year I decided that I was going to try and make the trek finally. I was going to try and find the old boathouse. I put on some sturdy gear and off I went, and when I got down there I realised pretty quickly why it was an inaccessible corner of the river, why nobody actually goes down there anymore. There was a very steep bank, a point at which I had to climb foot width along a steep cliff to get to the area, because I wasn't able to get there via the other way in which the original residents would have accessed the boathouse because of all the new planting. So finally I found the place. X marks the spot. I knew I had found the place because the ground was a different kind of material to the rest of the woods, and the bank was a little steeper. However, I couldn't find any real trace of the boathouse that had existed years and years ago. However, when I finally got to this spot, I had such a strange feeling come across me. It was really as if I had slipped into another time. And when I was standing there thinking about the people who used to come down and get onto the boats and row along the river and perhaps fish from their boats, I felt an overwhelming sense of closeness to the residents of these manor houses. And I looked up the river and I looked down the river, and I had this very deep, intense moment of silence, which was suddenly interrupted by what I can only describe as sounding like an ancient cowbell ringing. It rang 3 times, very methodically. Ding, ding, ding. And it was just in front of me. Naturally, I nearly died with fright because the sound was so close, and yet I was literally in the middle of nowhere and totally inaccessible place to most people with any sense. And the sound was just so crisp and so clear. It was undoubtedly real, and yet there was no way the sound could exist. So with my breath stuck in my chest, I looked around, trying to see if there was any bells attached to any trees anywhere, but there wasn't. The sound had literally come from the air, right in front of me. I went home after that and I really started to think about my relationship with these old ghosts, so to speak. I have their possessions, things that they discarded but which meant something to them, which they touched, their mouths, their hands, they touched these things. And here I was, retracing their footsteps and reclaiming their objects. Strangely enough, a couple of weeks later, I was lying in bed when I was suddenly awoken by the sound of what I can only describe as a huge shattering of glass. And it was coming from the direction of this bottle, which I have on display. I was so scared that I did what I used to do as a kid and went stiff under the bed covers, and I couldn't move to turn on the light to see what had happened. But I just assumed that this bottle, for some reason, maybe because of the heat, the summer heat, had exploded. But when I woke up in the morning, the bottle was completely whole. There isn't a crack, there isn't a chip, everything is completely whole. It was at that point I started to wonder whether these ghosts from yesteryear are really still with me, as well as their objects, as well as the places where they used to walk, where they used to laugh, where they used to live. Maybe they're right here, right now. My second story is called Lucy. I've mentioned before in other creepy story videos that when I was a kid I used to have a best friend, and we were very interested in doing the Ouija board. We were both troubled kids to some extent, and I think this is what pushed us towards doing the Ouija board. But I have to preface this story by saying that if you are thinking about doing the Ouija board, don't. It's not worth it. Especially if you are a kind of person that's triggered by something. Know your triggers and know that this might be one of them. It's just not worth it. But anyway, my friend and I, we did Ouija boards over a couple of years, I think, and probably there was never a good experience anytime we did one. It was never fun and games, it was always creepy and scary, and inevitably ended up with one of us going to bed that night thinking about the afterlife and the horrors of humanity and everything unpleasant that you can think of. But one day, my friend and I decided to go and do a Ouija board, and we met each other and asked each other, what is the most scary place you can think of to do a Ouija board? And of course, the answer was in the middle of the graveyard. So we trekked down to the graveyard, but once we got there, we chickened out. We couldn't do it. We didn't want to be caught for a start, plus we didn't think that it was morally quite correct to do it as well. So we did the next best thing and we broke into the school grounds that was overlooking the graveyard, and we sat on a hill so that we could see all the graves below us. And we got out our Scrabble board, which we used to use. We used to flip it upside down and put the Scrabble letters around the edge. And we started to do the Ouija board. We used a glass in the middle of the board and placed our fingertips on the glass. And then we would ask, are there any spirits present? At which point the glass would inevitably start to move. Sometimes the glass would move quickly and sometimes it would move very, very slowly. On this particular day, it was a very stormy day. It was about to rain. There were huge gales blowing everywhere. The sky was black. The leaves were being blown off the trees. It was a cold and bitter day. So we sat down on the grass and we started the Ouija board, and immediately a spirit supposedly came through. And the glass moved over to the letter L. L, L, it kept saying. L, L. My friend asked, is that your name? Is that your initials? L, L? Please tell us your full name. and the glass kept going back to L, L. It seemed to be stuck in a stutter loop. We kept asking for the spirit to tell us its real name, its full name, so we could have a proper conversation with it and ask it some questions. And eventually, the glass spelled out the name Lucy. But immediately after Lucy, it spelled out the word lull, L-U-L-L. Then, the same as it had repeated L-L, it started to repeat Lucy, lull, Lucy, lull, Lucy, lull. My friend said, "Is that your name? That's a strange name." I said, "Lull means to calm, I believe. Maybe it's asking us to go to a quieter place out of the storm." My friend said, "Well, that's weird. That is just a weird thing that a spirit would be saying." I said, "I know, but I can't think of anything else." And my friend was really eager to get to a point where the spirit was spelling out something more than Lucy Lull. And she was getting quite frustrated. And she started to yell. And she started to say, tell us something more. Why are you dead? How did you die?" And the spirit was moving the glass so rapidly at this point, it was almost as if the spirit was getting annoyed at my friend. "Lucy, lull, Lucy, lull, Lucy, lull." And then suddenly the board flew into the air, tipped over. The Scrabble letters went for meters. The board was upside down. The glass wasn't broken, but it was lying upside, and my friend looked pale. I said to my friend, "This is not a good idea. Whoever Lucy Lull was, she clearly does not like the storm." My final story is called Children of the Corn, and I guess it's a story that has a touch of comedy about it. I can look back and laugh now, but I still think it's totally weird. And I can still feel the emotions I felt when I was going through this. I was recently looking up some information about tulpas as well, and it really reminded me of this story about the manifestation of perhaps things in our minds. So this is the story. When I was a kid, I was a latchkey kid, and subsequently neighbourhood kids who were a little bit older used to act as my babysitter for periods of the day. One such babysitter was called Lulu. That's not her real name, but I'm going to protect her identity. And Lulu really couldn't be bothered to look after younger kids, so she would take me into her house and she would put horror movies on. Some of the horror movies I remember watching were the Friday the 13th movies, Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and another one was Children of the Corn.
Children of the Corn.
You may have heard of Children of the Corn. It's a 1980s horror movie in which young people emerge from the cornfields and set about killing people. I was clearly far too young to have watched that movie, and unfortunately it set off in me a kind of strange neurosis. I had a friend who lived opposite where I lived, and we were divided by a playing field. In the middle of the playing field there was a burnt patch of land where every year a fire would be built, a bonfire, to celebrate Guy Fawkes Night. After Guy Fawkes Night there always used to be embers, a pile of black embers, and it would be there all year until they lit the fire again the next November. And for some reason I developed the idea that the Children of the Corn lived in this black patch of embers, which I used to call the Black Patch. I was so convinced of it. I thought that they lived underneath the black patch, and so I avoided walking on top of the black patch. And every time I went to my friend's house and I had to return, I would either run right round the playing field, or I would run and then get to the black patch and then avoid it. And every time I used to run past the black patch, I couldn't breathe. I was so scared. It's kind of a ridiculous fear looking back, but what happened next was very strange. There was at that time living in the neighbourhood a man called Billy. He was a man with learning disabilities and he couldn't speak properly. And unfortunately, because of the cruel nature of man, he was nicknamed Billy the Mad, a twisted, take on the Billy the Kid moniker. Billy used to walk around the neighbourhood pushing a wheelbarrow full of wood. Nobody really knows why. And he used to speak to everybody, at least his definition of speaking. You could never understand what he used to say. He sounded like this. And that's literally what he sounded like. I'm not trying to be funny, I'm not trying to be cruel, he just sounded like that, scary. And as a young child, it was even more scary when he used to run towards you, waving his hands and shouting like that. I noticed that Billy would watch us kids quite closely. I think he just wanted a friend really, and he wanted people to talk to him. But you couldn't go out of the house without Billy coming out of his, and he would follow you down the road. There were times I actually went out way earlier than necessary to see if I could get away from Billy, to see if I could go out without him appearing. And I would like go out at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he would come out at 6 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't get away from him. And I had this awful feeling that it was me in particular that he was watching. So anyway, how does Billy relate to this story? Well, one day I was returning from my friend's house and I was running across the grass because I always used to run in case the children of the corn stuck their hands out of the black patch and grabbed my legs and pulled me down. When I avoided the black patch and I was just running around it when suddenly I tripped on something and I fell. I can still remember my reaction to this. I looked over to see what I had tripped on and I couldn't believe what I could see. It was a corn dolly. For those of you who don't know, this is basically a dolly fashioned out of corn sheaves. And I completely remember as though it was a movie scene that I bent over and picked it up and I was staring at it like and I had it in my hand, and then I remember with disgust I went and chucked it back down on the ground. I couldn't believe that it was there, and I felt it was a sign from the children of the corn that they were going to get me. However, just at that very moment, Billy the Mad emerged from his house and started running towards me. He was shouting and pointing at the corn dolly. Was Billy the person who fashioned the corn dolly? Did he know something about my fears? Could he, because he was a different kind of person, sense what I was going through? Did we connect on a psychic level? Did he have something to do with the children of the corn? Was he part of their gang? All of these things were going through my mind. But faced with the terror of the corn dolly and Billy running towards me like that, screaming, I just scrambled to my feet and I just ran and ran and ran until I was home, and I slammed the door. Looking back now, I still think it's incredibly weird that there was a corn dolly on that field. Corn dollies were so old-fashioned at that point. We were living in an era of Cabbage Patch dolls. There was no way that anybody was playing with a corn dolly. And it related so much to my fears about the children of the corn coming from that particular area that it just seemed so unlikely to me that it had happened. But it had happened. The next day, I walked across to where the corn dolly had been lying. I had told my family this, by the way. I had said that I'd found a corn dolly and that it must have been the children of the corn who'd left it there. And of course, I got the inevitable, like, what? What is she talking about? They thought I was a little bit crazy, I think. But I wanted to prove that the corn dolly had been there, so I returned to the spot. And I gingerly walked over there, looking for the corn dolly, but when I got there, the corn dolly was gone. However, I knew that it hadn't been some kind of vivid waking dream, because there on the spot, there was a lone piece of corn lying, which I picked up. And now looking back on that story, and with the ideas of tulpas in mind, I sometimes wonder whether it is possible to manifest your fears. Did I actually manifest the corn dolly because I was so scared of the idea of the children of the corn. Who knows? Thanks guys for watching today, and if you enjoyed this video, I have a couple of other creepy story videos up on my channel and you are very welcome to watch those too. Leave a comment if you want to tell me what creepy things have happened to you in your life. I'm always interested to hear about other people's paranormal and supernatural experiences. And until next time, bye!